Test. Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Fryer. I'm a staff attorney here at Pura. And as you may already know, a revised notice of hearing was posted to this docket yesterday, wherein the authority designated me to act as the hearing officer for this evidentiary hearing in docket number 241106, which is the joint application for Verizon Communications, Inc. and Frontier Communications Parent, Inc. for approval of a change of control. I believe we might be having some technical issues with our cameras, but I've been assured that the audio is working. For those streaming on YouTube, you won't be able to see us, but you could hear us. The first thing I would like to do is start with taking appearances from counsel. So let's begin with counsel for Verizon.
Good morning, Frederick Thomas on behalf of Frontier.
Good morning. Amy Markham on behalf of Frontier and Verizon.
Good morning, Attorney Fryer. On behalf of the Office of Consumer Counsel, I'm Bert Cohen, staff attorney, and with me is Ms. Rihanna Ash. And in back of the Consumer Counsel herself, Claire Coleman is present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other appearances? Okay, thank you. I just have a couple of administrative things that I would like to say, and then I'll open it up to everyone else for further administrative matters. First, we will take a 30-minute break for lunch between 12 and 12:30, and the hearing will end promptly at 5:30. Additionally, the authority proposes to reserve the last hour of today's hearing for cross-examination by the Communication Workers of America if necessary. Finally, as a reminder, pursuant to the ruling in motion number 13, the parties shall meet and confer no later than February 21st on any evidentiary issues not resolved during this hearing. So for counsel and any parties not represented by counsel, are there any other administrative matters which you would like to have addressed ahead of the hearing?
Thank you, Attorney Fryer. Would you like me to podium or?
If your microphone's working from there, that's fine.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. We do have several with respect to the Communications Workers of America. We're happy that you've arranged for that to happen today. What I wanted to say was that we're obviously not going to be finished with the OCC cross today. We will need another hearing, but we were going to ask if Pura staff or another participant in this proceeding would like to do some cross this afternoon. Let's talk about that, and maybe we can work out something at lunchtime. If anyone else other than the CTA needs to.
Understood. If that could be, yeah, discuss during lunchtime. If there's somebody else or another party that wants or participant wants to speak at that time, if you can work out some type of scheduling to reserve that time at the end of the hearing for today, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you. Next, with respect to motion number 3, we have no cross-examination, nor do we intend to present, bless you, nor do we intend to present oral argument unless some other participant feels the need to do so. We have so much to discuss with our witnesses who are in person here today, and we don't want to take up time on a legal issue that we can address in the brief. There's no timing issue here with respect to that. The authority can, to the extent it feels it needs to, decide motion number 3 as part of the final decision. So I just wanted to offer that, if that's acceptable.
Verizon and Frontier have no objection to that, and we can leave that legal issue to the briefing.
Okay, that works for the authority as well.
Third, I'm sorry, but I just want to make sure we iron these things out. We do have some cross on the confidential information and materials. but with the authorities' rulings on the motions, excuse me, on Verizon and Frontier's motions for protective order that was issued yesterday, we haven't had a chance to review those yet. We may be able to address our confidential questions with additional interrogatories to save time. And we can discuss that with the attorneys for Verizon and Frontier later. And then finally, I promise you, Attorney Fryer, we understand the applicants may request that the next hearing date be rescheduled. And we do not anticipate objecting to that. We do request that in terms of the briefing schedule, that the brief 2 weeks after, there's 245 interrogatories, pre-filed testimony, a very large application with exhibits. We would ask the authority to provide the attorneys. We're all overworked in this hearing. We ask that you give us 3 weeks, if that would be acceptable. So I'll defer over to.
Thank you, Attorney Cohen. Hearing Officer Pryor, that's so we would like to push off the next hearing date to the week of March 3rd. And we understand from the OCC that March 5th, 6th, and 7th are available for them. And if the authority is available on any one of those 3 days, we would ask that it be rescheduled from the 28th of February to one of those dates. And if necessary, and we would certainly support having that final hearing remote, if possible.
I would like you to do, I know it's an extra step, but if you could file a motion in the docket with this request, we'll take it under advisement, especially with respect to Attorney Cohen's concerns about the briefing schedule. If you file that motion on the docket, and then if you can confer with the parties and comment in the motion as to whether the parties agree to extend the statutory deadline by 1 week to accommodate the request of pushing back the hearing date, the supplemental hearing date. File that, and we will get a ruling out rather quickly on that. If that,
Thank you.
if
That makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have no further administrative matters. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
For now.
Thank you. Understood. Any other administrative matters?
Yeah, I guess just to comment on the OCC's discussion about the confidentiality, we're happy to sit down and talk through that and make sure that it's dealt with appropriately.
Thank you. And I understand the concern is that you didn't have a chance to review the motion rulings, and I know they were just posted. I don't know how many were, how much portion of the documentation was granted with protection and not. I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think most of it was granted protection. So that may streamline your conversations a bit, but understood. Thank you. Okay, since there's no more administrative matters, I'd like to move on to the public comment portion. Do we have any members of the public who would like to submit any public comment? Have it been? See that there's no persons seeking to provide public comment. We'll move forward to the swearing in of the witnesses. We'll start off with the panel for the company, obviously. If you could introduce your panel, I will swear them in.
Thank you. Starting with Paul Sullivan. Paul, could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Good morning. My name is Paul Sullivan.
Good morning.
Vassington.
Good morning. I'm Paul Vassington, Senior Director of Regulatory and Government Affairs for Verizon.
Mr. Nugent.
Good morning, Tom Nugent. I'm the Vice President for Consumer Sales and Service.
Ms. Ellis.
Good morning. Allison Ellis, Senior Vice President, Business Development for Frontier.
Thank you. If all the witnesses could please raise your right hand, I'll administer the oath, at the conclusion of which, will you please say I do? Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty or perjury?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. If you could now have your witnesses adopt their pre-filed materials.
Thank you, Attorney Fryer. I will start with Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, could you please state your name and position for the record?
My name is Paul Sullivan. I'm Vice President of Wireline Network Operations for Verizon.
Thank you. And Mr. Sullivan, did you provide joint pre-filed direct testimony to the authority dated January 24th, 2025 in this docket?
Yes.
Was your testimony prepared under your direct supervision and control?
Yes.
Do you have any corrections or changes that you would like to make to your pre-filed testimony?
No.
And Mr. Sullivan, have you also prepared or been involved with preparing and reviewing and sponsoring certain responses on behalf of Verizon to interrogatories issued in this docket?
Yes.
Were the responses prepared under your direct supervision and control?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to those responses at this time?
No.
Mr. Sullivan, do you adopt the joint pre-filed testimony and discovery responses as part of your sworn testimony in this docket today?
Yes.
Moving to Mr. Nugent. Please state your name and position for the record.
Tom Nugent, Vice President for Consumer Sales and Service.
Mr. Nugent, did you provide joint pre-filed direct testimony to the authority dated January 24th, 2025?
Yes,
Was your testimony prepared under your direct supervision and control?
it was.
Do you have any corrections or changes to that testimony?
I do not.
And Mr. Nugent, were you also involved with preparing and sponsoring certain interrogatory responses?
Yes.
And were those responses prepared under your direct supervision and control?
Yes,
Do you have any changes to those responses?
I do not.
Mr. Nugent, do you adopt the joint pre-filed testimony and discovery responses as part of your sworn testimony today?
I do.
Mr. Vasington, please state your name and position for the record.
It's Paul Vassington, Senior Director of Regulatory and Government Affairs for Verizon.
Thank you. Mr. Vasington, did you provide joint pre-filed direct testimony to the authority dated January 24th, 2025 in this docket?
Yes, I did.
Was your testimony prepared under your direct supervision and control?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to that testimony?
No.
And Mr. Vasington, have you also prepared or been involved with preparing and reviewing and sponsoring all of the responses on behalf of Verizon to the interrogatories issued in this docket?
Yes, I have.
And that includes interrogatory responses where your name is not necessarily listed as a sponsor. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Were the responses prepared under your direct supervision and control?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to those responses?
No, I do not.
You adopt the joint pre-filed testimony and discovery responses as part of your sworn testimony today.
Yes, I do.
Ellis, could you please state your name and position for the record?
Allison Ellis, Senior Vice President, Business Development for Frontier.
Ms. Ellis, did you provide pre-filed direct testimony to the authority dated January 24th, 2025?
Yes, I did.
And was that testimony prepared under your direct supervision and control?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to that testimony?
No.
Have you also prepared or been involved with preparing and reviewing, sponsoring certain interrogatory responses for Frontier?
Yes.
Were they prepared under your direct supervision and control?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to those responses?
No.
You adopt the pre-filed testimony and discovery responses as part of your sworn testimony in this docket.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Hearing Officer Fryer, the witnesses are available for cross-examination.
Thank you. Now, obviously the agenda's a little different now since our administrative matters were taken care of. So what we'll do is we'll proceed with the cross-examination of the panel with respect to the structure of the transaction, which I believe is the second, if I remember right with the agenda, it was the second portion of the agenda. We'll begin with that and Attorney Cohen.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I coming through on the microphone okay? Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Vasington, Mr. Nugent, I am Bert Cohen. I am a staff attorney at the Office of Consumer Counsel, and in that capacity, under our statute, we have a broadband policy coordinator, and I also wear that hat. Every time I'm rarely ever complained about that. Under the statute, also wear that hat. And with me is Ms. Rihanna Ash. Who Mr. Vassington, you've met before, who is a research analyst who works on telecom related matters. We're going to ask, we're looking forward to having a really good discussion with you today and during the next hearing. If you have any, if you don't understand the question, we're happy to try to rephrase it. Although typically, we'll growl about that if you ask us to, but we'll try to rephrase that if there's a part of that you don't understand. And with that, I'm going to ask several questions about the merger agreement. Which is I believe the exhibit to the joint application, and also exhibit B, which is the corporate schematics. If you need to go through your materials. I'll do an easy question, just to clarify under the agreement, the term parent refers to Verizon communications. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And the term merger sub returns to an entity called French merger sub. Is that true?
That's correct.
As I read the agreement, the France merger sub was created to consummate the transaction. Is that a fair understanding?
Yes, and it will cease to exist when the transaction is done.
Thank you, Mr. Vassington. And then the company, interestingly, is Frontier. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I got that. But then another term is introduced into the document, which is the surviving corporation. And as I read it, the surviving corporation is Frontier. Is that correct? Take your time if you.
Yes,
That's in section 1.01. I'm sorry, I didn't give you the reference.
that's all right. Yes, the France merger sub, the merger sub that's created for the proceeding will merge into Frontier Parent, and Frontier Parent will be the surviving corporation and a subsidiary of the parent, Verizon Communications, Inc.
Okay. So the directors of the merger sub immediately become the directors of the surviving corporation. Is that an accurate reading? And I think that I have in my notes a parentheses A, so I don't know, Mr. Vassington, if that was where it is, but I'm just trying to understand,
No, and I know I've read that reference too, so I'm just trying to find it.
It's okay if you want to come back, if you want to. Maybe I'll try to rephrase the question. Maybe that'll help. The directors of Frontier Communications parent, will they be different post-transaction than they are pre-transaction?
Let me read to you what this provision is in section 1.06. By virtue of the merger and without any action on the part of parent, merger sub, the company, or any other person, the directors of merger sub, immediately prior to the effective time, shall be the directors of the surviving corporation immediately following the effective time. And then just goes on to that discussion. So it would be the directors of the France merger sub, which will dissolve, will be the directors of the surviving corporation, which is Frontier Parent.
Okay, and as we sit here today, do we know who the directors and officers are of the merger sub?
I do not.
Can we get either a read-in or a late filed exhibit as to whether the directors and officers of Frontier as it sits today or pre-transaction, what the if those same directors and officers will be the officers and directors of the surviving. I had to check to make sure I got the right language. So that's the surviving corporation. Did I make
Yeah.
that clear? I'm sorry.
I believe so, yeah. I think we'll definitely try to get you a read-in for that.
Okay,
today.
if you can't get a read in, we'll take it either way.
So that'll be read in A.
Okay, thank you. I guess I was also going to ask a related question, which you may want to put in there. Who's going to hold the shares of the merger of the surviving company? I assume it would be Verizon, but I don't know that. I just feel we need to have this information about what the corporate structure is going to look like.
Okay, so that would be B. We're gonna do a,
What, you can do it as combined, or if you want.
do A1 and 2.
Sure.
Fair enough.
Could you just repeat what
Sure.
A2 is?
Yeah, we're looking for who will hold the shares of the surviving company, which will be, as I understand it, Frontier Communications parent, based on Mr. Vazic's testimony.
Thank you.
All right, now I'm going to ask. Now, this is the question I'm trying. Most mergers and acquisitions of this nature, the company that's being acquired, the end of the post-transaction, it's not there. But in this case, it's different. We have a surviving corporation, at least in name, which is the same as the company that's being acquired. Why was the deal structured that way?
Not sure that it's true that that's how it's done most of the time. We acquired MCI 20 years ago, and it still exists as a subsidiary of Verizon. And I think that's how some of the other acquisitions we've done are structured. And we did XO about 10 years ago, TracFone recently. So certainly for Verizon having done this now for 20 years, it doesn't seem to me to be an uncommon thing. It seems more to be common to how these are done.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a Verizon. It's kind of, in my experience, it's relatively unique. Doing this for 40 years, so but anyway, so I'm just kind of interested. What's the theory? Do we know, is there anybody up here who can tell me why that is? Why do you hold MCI, the entity still there? Why do you hold X and O? Why do you hold Frontier Communications still there? Is it for tax reasons? Is it for regulatory approval reasons? I'm not making a judgment about it. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Can we get a late filed exhibit? What's the the purpose for leaving the acquiring company as a corporate entity, as an intermediate holding company, in this case of SNAP?
I think we might object to that one. I'm not sure why it's relevant. The purpose behind the negotiated contract and the setup of the corporations. How does that affect sort of the issues that we're dealing with today about whether or not the application is complete and the transaction is fine going forward?
Well, I mean, we might disagree on what the legal standards are, sir, but the reality is we want to know, what is Frontier Communications parent? Why is it there? And that will be in the chain of companies that SNAP will be under, or at least from Exhibit B. So that is the reason I don't see the objection being particularly strong, Attorney Fryer. So we claim this. we need this information. Why is there Frontier Communication? What is the purpose of Frontier Communications parent as an entity post-closing?
Hearing Officer Fryer, we'll withdraw the objection and provide a read-in response.
Do you want that as a read-in or as a late file exhibit?
Late file? We'll do that as a late file, so that would be late file 1.
Late file exhibit 1, and just so I'm clear, it's what is the purpose of, I'm going to shorten this and it will be explained upon, but what is the purpose of Frontier as an entity post-closing? Is that the gist of what late file exhibit 1 will be?
Frontier parent.
Correct, yes.
I'd like to refer to the definitions on page 83 of the merger agreement.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the number.
Page 83.
83.
Sorry. If I'm not talking loudly enough, let me know, please. I'm sorry. How's that? There's a term, material adverse effect, which applies to Frontier. I think, and on page 85, parent material adverse effect, which I assume refers to Verizon. And based on the definitions, would the failure to obtain a PUC approval, your approval in this case, in just one of the jurisdictions constitute a material adverse effect such that the national transaction would not go forward? In other words, do you have to hit home run in every jurisdiction that you're applying? Like, if you don't know the answer, we're happy to take that as a read-in or a late filed exhibit.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do that. This is a very complicated and extensive contract, and it has a lot of provisions referring back to each other. So just looking at the definitions, I wouldn't feel confident.
I understand. We just want this for the record.
Read-in, that would be read-in B.
Read-in B. And that would be if the definition of parent material adverse effect on page 85 would affect the whole transaction. Is that correct?
The failure, would the failure to obtain an approval in any one of the jurisdictions constitute a material adverse effect such that the national transaction would not go forward or could not go forward, either way? Legal proceedings, section 3.07 in compliance with laws, section 3.08. I don't want to step on Ms. Ash's questions about the settlement we have with Frontier, but that settlement goes on for 3 years. Can Verizon confirm for the record that if this transaction is approved, it will not in any manner change that settlement or the enforceability thereof?
Yes, the settlement that applies to Southern New England Telephone Company, we would abide by the obligations of that and would not be changed.
Okay. And you would state for the record that the enforceability thereof would remain in place for non-compliance
Based on the terms of the agreement.
based on the terms of the agreement? Yeah.
Yes.
Section 3.23, we're almost done.
Might be easier if you have a page number, just because the sections,
I'm
okay.
sorry, I didn't bring, the book is so big, the document's so big, I didn't Bill, I had the,
Each 34, Mr.
34, thank you. And it was
build,
3.23?
build commitments. I just want to ask, has Frontier confirmed to Verizon that it is in full compliance with build commitments?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, now I notice, I noticed that, Attorney Nancy Victory is not here with us today, although she's admitted pre-hoc. But by letter dated January 30th, 2025, which we were alerted to by Communications Daily, Attorney Nancy Victory, filed an ex parte with the FCC stating that Verizon, quote, will consistent with the continuation of authorized parties, USF-related obligations post-transaction, meaning this deal, assume all risks and consequences of noncompliance with program requirements, regardless of whether such noncompliance predates or postdates the consummation of the transaction. It says a lot more than that. But in essence, what I'm asking you is, does this indicate that Verizon is willing to be bound as a condition for approval of this transaction to assume all the risks and consequences of noncompliance by Frontier prior to the closing, regardless of any, and I'll use the term in the letter, regardless of any pre-existing or reasonably foreseeable conditions?
I'm not familiar with that ex parte, but it certainly is consistent with my understanding that we're taking on all obligations associated with Frontier and its subsidiaries. And yes,
Thank you, Mr. Vasington. If there's no objection, I'd like to Attorney Fryer introduce this letter as a late filed exhibit. So since I referred to it, it should be in the record.
We have no objection.
So that would be introduced as late file exhibit 2.
Two. Ex parte, we can call it Verizon ex parte to FCC. Vasington, I'm done with that line of questioning. Actually, there's one more. I'm sorry. Can we get a revised Schedule B that shows, it's a little bit more robust, that shows where Frontier Communications parent is with all the other intermediate holding companies in Verizon? I know that's probably a big document, but
You mean like a full Verizon Communications Organization chart?
yeah, do you
Can I
have,
provide that? We don't have it today, but we
No,
can provide
yeah.
that late filed exhibit.
yeah.
LFE 3?
That'd be yes, LFE 3, and that is, can you just repeat?
Attorney Saharko, just want to make sure I understand.
Full organization chart of Verizon Communications and all its affiliates,
Pre and post transactions. Is that okay, Attorney Fryer? You got that? Thank you. Ms. Ellis, I have a few questions for you. I didn't want you to feel left out. With respect to OCC3 response, that was the chart where we asked about all the states and the various federal, state and federal proceedings. Can you give us an update as a late filed exhibit where things stand in terms of the various proceedings? And if hearings are scheduled, just tell us the hearing dates so we know that. Not that we're going to attend the hearings. We just want to know where you are in the process on each of those.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that's LFE 4.
Yep.
And it's the hearing dates and status. Was that it?
Yes, status of regulatory proceedings. As you understand it, Ms. Ellis, can you elaborate on the role of Frontier Communications parent post-closing?
So Frontier as an organization will continue to exist. We will continue our operations just under different ownership.
And how will that relate to the Southern New England Telephone Company?
The Southern New England Telephone Company is a subsidiary of Frontier parent organization, and it will continue to be a subsidiary
It
post
will
close.
report to Frontier Communications parent?
Pardon me?
Who will be calling the shots? Will it report to Frontier, or will that go up to another entity in Verizon?
My understanding is that the parent-child structure will stay the same, just the parent ownership will be different after the close.
I'll let that go for now. We may have some more questions on that later. Ms. Ellis, in Connecticut, who is currently responsible for the day-to-day operations of SNET?
So our executive management team, and we have a team of senior executives across the nation. We do have operations folks within the state of Connecticut, and our chief legal officer is here in the state.
So ultimately the operations people, are the operations people who are like supervisors or whatever their titles are in Connecticut? Do they have authority to sign checks? Do they have authority to approve capital expenditures? What authority do they have?
Yeah, we have a matrix of authority, as most companies do. It really depends on the level of expenditure. So if it's a lower level expenditure, then somebody who is a supervisor or a director in the state may have the authority to approve the expenditure. Larger expenditures like capital projects actually get approved by our capital committee.
Again, we may come back to that, but thank you. One more question, sorry. I wanted to ask this of Attorney Seville, but he's not there. As you know, there was a settlement agreement with Cable COX that Attorney Seville and I negotiated in 2014, mostly concerning transmission matters involving the networks and what the document described as a network, quote unquote, cutover. There were a few bumps in that transition from what I recall. Do you have any recollection of that, or?
If you're talking about the 2014 transaction, yes, I'm aware of that transaction. I am aware that we had some transition issues following that transaction.
Thank you. That's really a much more concise way than I was putting it. Based on Frontier's experience with that transition of ownership of the SNET network from AT&T to Frontier, do you or does Verizon anticipate that there would be the same kind of issues that were faced, transition issues that were faced in 2014? And if so, what steps can be taken to minimize those issues?
So I don't want to speak for Verizon. I will say from Frontier's perspective, that involved a new technology transition for Frontier. And the transaction, this transaction doesn't involve the same technology transition. Also, I will say that the executive management that was in place at the time of that transaction and overseeing that transaction is no longer with Frontier. So we have a different, very sophisticated management team. And of course, we will go through the integration planning process in order to address and guard against those kind of issues in the future.
Does Verizon want to respond to that question as well?
Just to say that's consistent with our understanding too, that this transaction is occurring at the parent company level. And so there's not that same kind of technology cutover, but all of the other considerations are going into place with the transaction integration planning process.
Just related to that, if anybody at Verizon can respond to this, have the cable CLECs approached you since the deal was announced about discussing the transition from a technical standpoint or a legal standpoint?
I'm not aware of any contact of that nature in Connecticut.
Okay. They probably don't have a concern then. I wasn't asking for them. I was just, so you understand, we do not want the same type of transition issues that occurred there in 2014. Keep going. I need a break, but I got a few more questions. Maybe Mr. Vasington, this is for you, but I encourage Mr. Nugent, Mr. Sullivan to jump in. The question is, can you tell us why the Frontier acquisition is attractive to Verizon in Connecticut?
Yes, definitely. The industry is highly competitive, highly dynamic, subject to a lot of changes in technology and consumer demand. And Verizon believes that expanding our fiber footprint and our opportunity for future fiber expansion is very important, both in terms of meeting consumer demand for advanced service bundles, but also in terms of our technology deployment across the country and what it means for our backbone network, for our nationwide wireless network, and also for deployment of new services like our intelligent edge network. So the opportunity to obtain control of the Frontier operating companies, including Southern New England Telephone Company, gives us that opportunity to bring to Connecticut consumers more choices and also to strengthen our underlying network.
That's all you wanted to say, Mr. Vasington? That was a joke. I'm trying.
I could go for a long time if you want.
I'm trying to lighten you up because we've had these discussions before. All right. Mr. Nugent, Mr. Sullivan, do you have anything?
I would agree with Mr. Vasington.
I'd add that we have a great track record here. It will be continuous. We operate Mass, Rhode Island, New York, and we've had a great relationship with the CWA that represents SNET, and we're excited that Connecticut is part of the Frontier deal.
Okay. Thank you. I like that. Who will be ultimately responsible post-transaction for making decisions about approving capital expenditures in Connecticut?
I think my answer is going to be similar to what Ms. Ellis said. I mean, all corporations generally have a matrix of capital planning and capital decisions that depends on exactly how big the project is. The specifics of managerial structure and oversight are being worked out as part of the transaction planning process.
Okay. Obviously, there's based on what we're reading between the lines is there's a lot of interest in expanding, hopefully, the network upgrade that hasn't been done yet in Connecticut. So we're just I think it's important for the authority and certainly for the public to know who's going to be making those decisions. Will it be Frontier Communications parent? Will it be at the top VCI? I know capital expenditure for a public company, publicly traded company, CapEx is always, it's always a big deal, but we want to know in Connecticut who's going to make that call.
So on a very high level, this issue was addressed by the Verizon management team when they announced the transaction, and then a few months later when we discussed our broadband planning requirements. And so, as I said, being able to obtain not only the fiber that's already been built, but also the opportunity to do more in the future was a significant factor in us making the decision to make this, to do this transaction. And we've also announced that we have the goal of increasing our fiber deployment locations over time. So it's certainly at a very high level, that is the objective of the Verizon Communications senior level C-suite management team for the entire Frontier footprint.
I might also just add that Frontier, since 2021, has undertaken a major fiber expansion across the state of Connecticut. In July or August of this year, we publicly announced that we had passed 1 million locations with fiber in the state. That's a 475% increase of the availability of fiber in the state. So we have done a significant we've made significant progress in fiberizing the state. And as you know, our footprint is essentially all of the state except for a small territory in Greenwich area.
We know the company. Ms. Ellis, since that's a great point. Do you recall off the top of your head what the commitment was coming out of the bankruptcy decision? How much you were, because I want to get it, all right, you did this because it was commitment that you made to come out of bankruptcy to get Pure's approval, and then you did more. I just want to get a.
I don't recall exactly what our commitment was. I certainly could provide that as a read-in. What I will say is that we met and exceeded our commitment significantly. Not only did we meet our commitment ahead of schedule, but then we went well beyond that. As I said, we announced this summer 1 million locations. That certainly far exceeds what our commitment was.
Okay, can we do that as a read-in? What we want to know what you did when you did it with respect to I should have brought the conditions with me, but I apologize, I didn't. That condition, and then what you did above and beyond.
Okay.
That would be good to have in the record, I think, Attorney Clark.
So that'd be read in C.
More questions. Let's talk a little bit about the future of the SNET network, given that Verizon will be the dominant, really the only ILEC in public service company in Connecticut, public service company being a statutorily defined term. With the ability to serve every residence, every business, basically every institution in the state, you're going to have that reach. What does Verizon foresee the SNET network will look like 5 years after the transaction? Don't let your jaws drop. I just want you to think, help us see what the vision is going to be. And if you want to write this up as a late filed exhibit, we have no problem with that. We would just like to see what the vision is for the SNET network, because this is our company in our state that's going to be able to, like I said, serve everyone. We have military and defense installations here, major defense construction installations. We have a lot of business and industry here, and it's our state. We want to know what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, Attorney Cohen, I'll answer for Verizon. I can tell you that Verizon's track record is a great on service. We know that it's a competition absolutely helps to drive the reliability in our what we care for. We are a local business. You know, our headquarters is in New York. Like I told you that we are Mass, Rhode Island, New York. we surround the community, and we'll provide reliable service. And that is what is at the core of who we are. We absolutely, we rely on not only providing great service, but for our customers to tell us that we have great service. And when we look at our NPS, we take surveys, we come out on top of those surveys versus our competitors. And we take great pride in delivering great service. So I would tell you, over the next 5 years, we will provide great service here in Connecticut.
I would just add to that, so after the transaction, Verizon Communications, Inc. will control the 2 telephone companies in Connecticut. So you're right, we'll have the network breadth across the entire state. But I would also note that we're in a very competitive environment. So it's not like the old days where every single customer was a customer of the ILEC. We face a lot of competitive alternatives out there who, keep us on our toes and ensure that we do everything we can to meet customer demands.
I would just maybe add to that cable companies have the ability to service every location in the state as well. It's a matter of their investment and priority determinations, whether they do or not.
I was really, this is all great, and it's good to have in the record, and it's good to hear from Mr. Sullivan about the commitment to customer service, because we will get into some of those questions. That's very important to us. We are the Office of Consumer Counsel, obviously. Consumer being responsible and responsive to consumers is very important. But what we want to do is, what's the vision for the SNET network itself? Will it be all fiber to the home, mixed copper fiber? Is it going to be, to borrow Jackson Brown's title song, Road in the Sky? Is it going to be a road and the sky type of scenario where you're doing wireline and you're also using the wireline to supplement your Verizon wireless? Give that some thought. Why don't we have that as a late filed exhibit? That'll give them some time to flesh that out, so the authority will have that, rather than put all the witnesses on the spot. Right? There's no objection.
I think we're prepared to answer now, if certainly put that out there.
Yeah, so after the transaction takes place, Verizon will have essentially operations under Southern New England Telephone, Verizon New York in Greenwich, Verizon Business, and Verizon Wireless. Exactly what each of those networks will look like in a dynamic, I referred earlier to the industry being dynamic. That means we're responding not just to what we want to build, but also what our competitors are building. And then we've also got some major government funding programs going on right now. So it's really hard to say on February 5th, 2025, what the network will look like in 5 years because of all these changing conditions. But the important thing to remember is why this transaction is happening is because we want to provide customers the most advanced services over the most advanced networks possible, including expansion of those advanced networks. And then also, in terms of our wireless network, I mentioned earlier that having fiber backhaul and being able to do more things with an intelligent edge network is very important for advanced services that we're developing and putting into the market today. So what we'd be looking at going forward is a better network under Verizon's parent control than would happen absent the transaction. And that's the important factor, I think, for the authority to consider.
Okay, we'll move on. Last question. For me, for now. Verizon often references severe weather impacting its performance and its quality of service reports in the exception reports that it submits on a semi-annual basis to the authority. And I believe it was also mentioned in Verizon's pre-filed testimony. Given that this is a known issue and not one likely to change in the near future, what are Verizon's plans to improve the resiliency of its network in Greenwich and the SNET network throughout the rest of Connecticut. Resiliency.
Sure, Attorney Cohen. A few things that we do is, we rely on our technicians that are out in the field to look for plant conditions that might need attention, and, where they're working and where they're operating is they would document that information, and if it's immediate need, they would get in touch with their supervisor to address it. And if not, they would document it in their system, and we would get there within 90 days. We take, again, like I said, we take great pride into delivering great customer service. And, I look at that report every single day, what our report rate is, both on the installation side as well as on the maintenance side. And, storms do run through, and cables do get dug up. But generally, when you look at the Greenwich area for customer service, we deliver great service there. And, we know that we're in a very competitive environment, that customers have choice. And if we don't deliver great service, customers can leave us on a dime.
Okay. Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is every month, we have climate change. I read what Verizon is dealing with. We have in Southern California. We have these events, and you cannot foresee them all. But relative storms here happen frequently. You know that. We know that. We live it. We're trying to get at have you given thought to what you're going to do? I hate to use the term harden the plant, but to make the plant more resilient so that you can only in the most exceptional circumstances be affected with respect to outages.
We talking Greenwich or?
Well, we're talking Greenwich
Okay.
now, but we can,
Sure.
let's
In
assume that
Greenwich,
goes to-
we're deploying fiber across Greenwich. We're participating in the various different rural broadband grants and we just won a grant in Greenwich there. And, like I said, we take the network and the reliability very serious. We do, in our central offices, we monthly run our generators under load. And we, do the reliability is very important to us.
I would just add that I think we provided some information either in testimony or in discovery on the advantages of fiber as a more resilient network medium for the simple reason that it's not sensitive to moisture. And when you mention storms are typically about moisture. And so water is not the problem for a fiber optic network that it is for a copper network that operates on an electrical circuit.
Okay, is there a difference in terms of, I'm sorry, I thought I was done, but I have to follow up. This is important to us. How does network maintenance for fiber differ from copper wire network maintenance? Is there a difference there?
Sure. And I know that this is that when you look at on the fiber side, is that it's electric, it's light, and we actually can monitor the network more robust, and that's really to help us to understand where there's a failure.
Okay, so you can either way. You can tell can you tell at a central office location or some centralized location if there's an outage? You have that capability
On fiber?
on fiber or on POTS?
Definitely on fiber. And on POTS, a lot of times it's our customers that would call in a trouble report.
I'm going to give my voice a rest and let you gentlemen hear from, have a discussion with Ms. Ash.
Hi, folks. Brianna Ash, research analyst with OCC. Just a quick follow-up question with that line of questioning there. So am I correct to understand that for copper line customers, Verizon becomes aware of individual consumer outages when the consumer calls?
Yes.
Okay. And in instances where several consumers in the same neighborhood are reporting outages, if Verizon identifies that the location in the network that precedes that entire neighborhood from the central office to the individual locations, does Verizon generally assume that the rest of the neighborhood is out of service as well, depending on the severity of the issue preceding that neighborhood?
It would depend.
It would depend. Okay.
And we have to the technicians will go out and test the cable to determine what the severity of it is.
Okay, thank you. I do have more quality of service questions later, but we can jump. I'd like to shift focus to the Verizon Forward service offering that was mentioned in the pre-filed testimony. Great. Mr. Nugent, thank you so much. My first question is, am I correct in reading between the lines of the pre-filed testimony that Verizon Forward will be available to Frontier area customers following the merger?
Yeah, so Verizon Forward is a voluntary program that we have for customers that are financially disadvantaged. And we currently offer that in the Verizon footprint. And it would be our expectation post-merger after due diligence to explore offering that across our entire footprint.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see eligibility criteria mentioned in the pre-filed testimony. Can you tell me what would make a consumer eligible for Verizon Forward?
I can. It's also on our website. I'm not trying to be coy. I just have to find it for you. So a couple of the ways that somebody could qualify is they could be Lifeline eligible, Medicaid, SNAP, federal Pell Grants.
Is there any? Okay, let me jump back to that.
Sure.
Can you tell me, is Verizon willing to offer the Verizon Forward discount for less than $20 in Connecticut?
No.
Does it offer the Verizon Forward discount for less than $20 anywhere else?
It does it offer it less than other places? There are certain areas where we abide by regulatory laws, and we do provide it less.
Now, you mentioned that Lifeline eligibility criteria is also a criteria for the Verizon Forward program. Can you tell me, do those benefits stack? Would a Lifeline customer receiving the federal Lifeline discount over Verizon services, would they also be able to receive the reduced rate Verizon Forward offers?
Yes, we do stack our discounts, but there are basements and ceilings that we put in place. So you would pay $20 a month, for instance, for 300 meg fiber service.
So, sorry, let me just make sure I have
Sure.
that correct. The Verizon Forward rate is $20, correct?
That's correct.
And then would the Verizon Lifeline discount, which I believe is $10 or $9.50, would that be deducted from that $20 rate?
Are you asking if it would be $20 minus the 10?
Yes.
No.
No. Okay. So the discounts would not be stackable.
That's correct for 300. And then the nice thing about Verizon Forward, unlike some of our competitors, is that we do not give you diminished service. So if a customer were to say, I want 1 gig speeds, we take Verizon discounts and would continue to stack. The various discounts would vary. So the benefit to the consumer is they could have any of our fiber services, and then discounts upon discounts could be placed. So at 300 meg, you're going to get to a $20 basement. But at a gig, you could do that and then auto pay and some other discounts that would give you a lower cost.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Mr. Nugent, can you tell me if the Verizon Forward terms are available to Verizon's DSL customers?
They are not.
And can you tell me if Verizon's Lifeline discount is available to DSL customers?
I believe to the best of my ability, they are. Lifeline is.
No, actually I can answer
Please.
that. DSL does not qualify for the Universal Service Administrative Company's standards for a Lifeline discount. Verizon's DSL does not meet those standards. So
Thank you.
it's not a Lifeline eligible service.
Thank you, Mr. Basington. So am I correct in understanding that for consumers who have copper line POTS service available, but not fiber available at their location, they are neither eligible for a Lifeline discount or the Verizon Forward discount
They're eligible for a Lifeline discount on their voice service.
on their voice service, which to my understanding is diminishing through FCC removal of support over a period of time.
Well, it's reached the point that the FCC had lowered it to, and then the FCC had originally planned to remove it entirely, but has delayed that, I think, at least for 4 years, maybe longer.
And what is the current voice subsidy that the FCC offers?
The number 925 popped into my head, but I'll correct it later on the record if it's different, but I believe that that's correct.
Thank you. I believe it started there. I think it might have gone down from there, but memory doesn't serve at the moment. So I'll let you take it back. As a read-in, that would be great.
Get a reading on that?
I think he's put the number out. I think he's going to confirm if that's correct.
Okay.
Is that, or change it if it's not, I guess is
Mhm.
the better way to say it.
So just to confirm, there is no low-income discount available for consumers who happen to be served with copper line internet service at this time.
For Verizon's current operations, that's correct, because our service does not meet the minimum requirements of the federal government.
And Verizon Forward, that program doesn't need to meet federal requirements. Is that correct? Because it's voluntary?
It's a voluntary program.
So would Verizon be willing to expand the eligibility criteria in Connecticut for Verizon Forward to DSL customers while they wait for a fiber upgrade?
No, at this time, we would not. We would do due diligence to check, but we would not. However, it is available for our fixed wireless access customers.
Can you tell us if the Verizon Forward plans, either of the speeds, are available to existing Verizon customers, or are they only available to new customers?
Verizon Forward is available to new and existing customers.
Thank you. And how does Verizon define a new customer, just for the record?
How does Verizon define a new customer?
Do they have to have no service for a period of months prior to establishing new service?
That's a good question. Typically, what we look at is a customer that doesn't currently have service with us. I'm not aware of a timetable that says that they couldn't have had that service.
Okay. I know that came up in the industry when some low-income broadband plans were rolled out a few years back. So I just wanted to see if those were still in
I
place.
think the good news is we offer it to new and existing customers.
It is good news.
And
Thank
yeah,
you.
that is good news. And our price plans, as you've probably read, we have a very unique way that we offer our price plans. We do not offer low introductory rates to get you hooked into Verizon and then raise those rates upon you. We're very transparent in our pricing, which I think is more good news for Connecticut.
I did actually have a question about that later
problem.
on, but you brought it up, so this is a perfect opportunity. So as I understand, other companies will offer a low introductory rate for about a year before jumping to the regular prices. Would you say that Verizon's regular prices are comparable to that which Frontier currently offers for similar services?
So I'm only familiar with Frontier's publicly available offerings, and I think that Verizon does offer very competitive rates. We're in the business of dealing with tough competition, and our goal is to both earn the right to sell to new customers and retain our current base. So yes, I think our prices are very competitive.
Okay, so if a consumer signs up for Verizon on day one and takes advantage of one of those competitive retail rates, they wouldn't receive an introductory discount for the first year the way perhaps a Frontier customer would. So by my understanding, aren't they paying more off the bat than a Frontier customer would be paying?
So I'm not doing a comparison to Frontier's rates for you. But I can tell you that our rates are public. They're very competitive, and we've got many ways that customers can save. You've mentioned Verizon Forward. We have discounts for auto pay. Another beautiful thing that we're bringing to Connecticut is bundling of our mobile and fiber services. We give a discount if you have both of those services. We also honor those who serve. So there's multiple ways that a customer could get a very, very competitive rate.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Okay, so going back to Lifeline a bit, this is referencing OCC 119 through 120, if you'd like to turn to it. Give you a moment.
OTC Discovery. I'm getting there.
Oh, no
Thank
worries.
you. I'm close. I'm on 120.
All right, thanks. I'll jump right back in. So if approved, Verizon is going to be capable of serving the entire state of Connecticut. So is Verizon willing to do more than one annual bill message and one annual newspaper advertisement notifying consumers especially in the newly acquired service area of the Lifeline benefit?
So at this time, I'm not prepared to make that commitment, but we do make publicly available information that the Lifeline benefit is out there. We do the bill notices, and it can be found on our website, same as Verizon Forward.
Sorry, I'm going to make you reference another
No problem.
interrogatory response. If you can jump to 128.
At 128?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I'm there.
Awesome.
A little quicker this time. Sorry.
We're in the right domain. Will Verizon make efforts to expand the take rate? Meaning, will Verizon encourage new or existing customers to apply for the Lifeline program, particularly in areas where fiber is available following the merger?
So currently, we have processes in place to let customers know about the Lifeline benefit. We will continue to do that as we come into the Connecticut footprint. And we will make it very publicly known that eligible customers can take advantage of it. I'm not prepared to say that we would do more or less. I'm not familiar with what Frontier does today.
Can you tell me, at least where Verizon already serves, if a consumer calls in who has services that make them eligible for Lifeline and they express to customer service representatives that they're having trouble paying their bill, is the Lifeline benefit proactively offered to consumers, or is information about Lifeline proactively offered to those customers?
Another great question. That is our practice. We do proactively offer it for a customer that mentions that.
And does Verizon do any additional Lifeline-related outreach, perhaps in person at events or door to door? Any additional efforts that Verizon makes? I'm just trying to build a
Certainly.
record. Thanks.
Understood. So as mentioned, it is on our website, so it is publicly available information. And we do have practices with door-to-door agents and the like. And if they're in areas that are that could be financially disadvantaged, that is a conversation that they have.
Thank you. And can you please confirm, Mr. Nugent, for the record, whether the Frontier Service Area will continue to be an ETC, an eligible telecommunications carrier, for the purpose of providing Lifeline in Connecticut following the merger? Or Mr. Vasington?
Yes, we have said we will continue Southern New England Telephone Company's participation as an ETC.
Okay, and there is no withdrawal currently planned?
We do not have any plans. Right.
Okay, with that, I am going to turn it back over to Attorney Cohen for my next round of questions and give my voice a rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ash. I'm going to talk a little bit about the end of the ACP program and the vulnerable population in Connecticut. Are any of you on the panel familiar with Connecticut's digital equity plan developed by the Connecticut Department of Administrative Services and the Commission for Educational Technology, which is under DAS?
I know that it exists. I did not read it.
Well, we're going to help you with that a little bit, Mr. Vasington. I don't want to read all the data. I mean, we'll probably, if there's no objection, we'll probably put a couple of excerpts into the record. But just to give you why our concern is about Lifeline, in terms of the survey done, and I can't give you the numbers on that, we have residents with disability, report disabilities of 14% of the people. Residents in covered households, residents from households under 150% of the federal poverty level, 21%. We have language barriers. And of course, we have veterans. So we have, I didn't mention all the covered populations, but we do have Connecticut. It is a tale of two states. We have very affluent communities, and we have inner city populations that are struggling to meet everyday needs. In conjunction with that, are you aware that the National Lifeline Association recently reported on a consumer survey given Congress's inability to enact the funding extension of the Affordable Connectivity Program? Are you aware that that survey was recently reported?
No.
Okay. I'm not going to go into all of it, but this one particular, there's a whole bunch of data, a little kind of along the lines of what covered populations are dealing with. But there's one that I thought you would find very interesting. And the conclusion was, the bold was, voice, text, and data are all essential. Tell us something we don't know, I suppose. But nearly 75% of the consumers surveyed value access to each of those three equally, which I thought was an interesting data. Those who were asked to prioritize one service over another said the voice service, telephony, was the most important service feature, which is 16%. So before I ask you the question, which is following up on Ms. Ash's question, we really want you to promote Lifeline and other lower cost programs to eligible Connecticut residents if Pura does approve this transaction. Can you think about what you could do to do that? What would be, what would be a home run for Verizon and for the state of Connecticut for you to promote Lifeline
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I can tell you one of the benefits that we bring is our local commitments and our local communities and the things that we do to respond to the needs of local communities. We have dedicated state government affairs managers who interface with local communities and local interest groups all the time. And we very often will participate in their programs. When they identify a community that they believe is not, maybe not as informed about the programs that are available to them. We participate in their neighborhood outreach programs. And, you described Connecticut as a tale of two populations. That's true across our entire footprint. Massachusetts, New York, Rhode Island, we all have a wide range of demographics. And so I could tell you that we work very closely with our local community partners. We participate a lot in New York City, for example, with their local outreach programs. I'm familiar with some programs in Rhode Island and Massachusetts that we participate in. So we would look forward to having the same relationship with groups and communities in Connecticut and participating in whatever programs they have to reach communities that they believe haven't been adequately served.
Well, thank you. That's encouraging. Should the transaction be approved and everywhere, so it's consummated, I would really hope to hear more about how you're going to, how Verizon will.
Yeah, and one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, Verizon is now a much larger lifeline provider than we were before since our acquisition of TracFone, which targets what we consider to be the value side of the market and is an ETC in every state, almost every state across the country, and has a lot of experience as well that we've learned from since the acquisition on addressing lifeline communities.
Okay, so I'm not being unfair to anyone here, or I'd like to, if there's no objection, provide the page of data from the Connecticut Digital Equity Plan into the record as a late filed exhibit, and also the National Lifeline Association survey. If there's no objection to that, just gives data about what customers.
We have no objection.
No objection? Okay. Okay,
So that's late filed exhibit 5.
LFV 5, we'll call the Digital Equity Plan. I won't put the whole thing in, but if you want the link, I'll send you the link. The Digital Equity Plan page on the covered populations reporting, and then on the LFV 6, the National Lifeline Association report. Thank you.
So or just to be clear, it's LFE 5 and 6?
Yeah,
So
I'll make
two
it
separate? Okay.
separate. Yeah.
Thank you.
Back to you, Ms. Ash. You already did that.
I'm gonna make you guys open the book again. I'm sorry.
Worries.
Could you reference OCC 107D?
David?
Yes.
Thank you. Got it.
So
Let's hold up on that. Yeah.
in this question, and I'll reiterate it a little bit as well. We had asked how many accounts did Verizon newly apply protection to in New York, subject to their rules, 16 CRR-NY 6095, in the years of 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. We're wondering when this information will become available.
We just want to make sure that part of this is redacted as confidential, the responses. So if we do get into
Oh,
this-
part of it is, but is this one a confidential response D? I don't believe so.
You're correct. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. we
Okay,
got into
yeah,
this.
I'm just asking when this will become available information.
Thank you.
You don't currently know the status of our supplemental response there, but we can check on that.
Thank you. And a follow-up question about that particular protection available to New York customers. How often does Verizon notify customers of that protection?
I don't know the answer to that. In New York, right? This is a reference to the program in New York.
That's correct.
Okay.
May we get a read-in or a late filed exhibit on that? That's.
Yeah, we'll do a late file for that one.
It's stated again, that'd be great. Yeah.
Well,
Sure.
please restate it.
Stating it again, the original request for information that was stated in OCC 107D was unavailable, and we're wondering when that information will become available. And then we're also wondering, how often does Verizon notify consumers of that reference protection?
That would be a separate late filed exhibit, I believe.
You want to do A and B?
A and B, because they're close.
Okay. No objection.
So along those lines, jumping to OCC 106, as I'm sure you can understand, we in Connecticut are very interested in receiving the same types of benefits that our neighbors in New York and Massachusetts are currently receiving from Verizon, which, to my understanding, Verizon has no trouble providing, unless I'm mistaken. But we're wondering if Verizon would commit to offering those same types of protections in Connecticut to our consumers following the merger.
So my response is consistent with what you see in OCC 106. There's no final or definitive answer at this time. We will take it under consideration as we go through integration planning, and we'll make a determination post closure.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Something else we're very concerned about at OCC is making sure that customer service and service in general is easily accessible to our consumers, both, in a virtual setting, if they're calling over the phone or using the online chat feature, but also for many of our consumers, they require or strongly prefer an in-person option. So we're wondering, if this merger is approved and consummated, will Verizon also be acquiring SNET Frontier's brick and mortar locations, such as storefronts and warehouses?
I would just say that we don't have any brick and mortar locations. I mean, we do have warehouses for reporting centers for our technicians, but we don't actually have storefronts throughout the state of Connecticut.
Is that something that Verizon might consider introducing to make more available to Connecticut residents the ability to interface?
So I will tell you,
Something, I'm sorry. We've spoken with a lot of elderly people who have had trouble with service quality type issues, out of service. They don't have access to the internet, obviously, if they're out of service. And in some places, the wireless coverage isn't really great. And they just want to have someone to talk to. Just thought I would add that. Thank you.
So I can restate my original question. With that context in mind, would Verizon be willing to make available brick and mortar locations for our consumers who may strongly prefer, either due to age or accessibility, or perhaps lacking another type of communication service to report an outage, somewhere where they could go?
so we have a long track record of providing outstanding customer service. I think you've seen that in our responses. We pride ourselves on that. It's one of the competitive advantages that we think we bring to the table. We have call center hours that are available in Connecticut, much like we see across our Verizon footprint. We make ourselves available for our customers to call, click, or chat with us. That being said, at this point in time, I'm learning about what Frontier has and does not have, so I cannot make a commitment to you at this time about a brick and mortar facility.
And currently, and I know this is this is a situation that happens somewhat frequently, from what I've heard from consumers. If a consumer's service is out, their phone's not working, their internet's not working, they may not have the option for mobility to go visit a neighbor or a family member, to report that outage. How would Verizon suppose or propose that a consumer report an outage if their Verizon service is out and they don't have a backup option?
So, Ms. Ash, I do believe there's one-off cases like that all of the time. I don't want to start making presumptions on what that customer should do. I couldn't guess. I can tell you that in our footprint today, we have a highly reliable network, and we've got a track record of understanding when services are out and dispatching on those services to repair them.
To be clear, fiber line outages could be identified by Verizon, but if this was a POTS customer who is out of service, is there any option in the future for a technology that might allow Verizon to identify when an individual POTS customer is out, save them reporting it, so Verizon could proactively address that consumer's outage?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. That's the end of this section of questions for me. Back over to you, Attorney Cohen.
I have one follow-up question on that. And feel free, anyone, to jump in. We don't have to pick on Mr. Nugent specifically. But it goes like this. You talk about the competition and your need to meet the competition in Connecticut. But the competition in Connecticut, certainly the cable broadband companies, they do have storefronts. They do have brick and mortar. And that's very, very useful. So if you're going to compete in Connecticut, don't you think that you are going to need storefronts in order to compete with the likes of the cable companies? Or excuse me, the cable broadband companies?
It's an interesting observation, and as we go through the planning process and evaluating what we do in any of the markets that we operate in, that's certainly a consideration to put into the mix.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vasington.
You're welcome.
Attorney Fryer, may we take a 5-minute break?
Sure, so 11:46, come back.
Thank you.
John. Oh, yeah, no, we're doing great.
All set. Attorney Cohen, I just have a quick question for you.
On the record or off the record?
It could be on the record. It's just, it's administrative about how long do you think you have for this set of questions? Because I was going to suggest that maybe you finish up this set and then we break for lunch. Does that make sense to you?
Well,
About 1/3.
well, about 1/3 of it.
1/3 of questions from Verizon. That doesn't include.
We have 1/3 of the questions for Verizon done. We have barely touched Frontier. But in terms of what I have now,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about polls, so we can go to 12:30 if
Okay.
that's okay.
That's perfect. That's what I was looking for.
I'll.
That'll
break
work.
it then. Okay.
Is that okay with everyone else?
We're back. Everybody back. We're going to talk a little bit about utility poles in our questions. I'm going to start off with Frontier. So I guess Ms. Ellis, it's you. And I have some poll administration questions based on the interrogatory responses. In the responses to OCC 22, 23, 24, and I believe 25, Frontier states as one of the reasons for the pending transfers, pending make-ready applications being in the over 45-day category was attributable to the accuracy of Alden 1 records. Now, in Frontier's pre-surveys, it then go on to say, in Frontier's pre-surveys conducted as part of the Pura single visit transfer pilot program, we have found that over 30% of either is either already completed and not updated in Alden, that's with a capital A1 with capital O, or still awaiting another party upstream to complete work before Frontier can complete our transfer. Do you realize that that sentence points the blame on Frontier as your facilities are at the bottom of the utility pole, and therefore you're the last attacher, excuse me, not you, but Frontier is the last attacher required to update Alden 1 if the work is completed. Do you want to take a look at that and see what your response is? If you're the last one that needs to transfer, you're the one who has to enter that, put that entry into Alden 1 software.
I'm not an expert on the Alden One software, but my understanding is that each attacher has to go in and provide updated information. So the response to the interrogatories is that when we did the review, attachers who had already done some work had not actually notated that properly in the system. Therefore, we didn't yet get the notation that it was time for us to complete the work.
Okay, I'll accept that. Thank you. You never mention in those responses the fact that Frontier, based on my own personal opinion and from what I gleaned from the Connecticut, from the Communications Workers Association responses to interrogatories, that SNET simply doesn't have sufficient resources to attend to the poll administration job to keep up with the volume. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that? Why was that omitted?
I wouldn't necessarily agree that it's a lack of resources, but I will say that there is a significant increase in volume of attachers. That's true across the country. There's been a significant amount of investment in fiber by Frontier and other companies. And with the federal funding that has funded fiber expansion, we just have a lot more attachments than are typical in a 3 to 5 year period.
Right. In Connecticut, though, the federal funding has just been one of the grants programs has just been awarded, so that process really hasn't gotten going yet.
That's true. It's been slower to be awarded in Connecticut than in other states, but Connecticut has been a very active state for fiber expansion by Frontier and other parties.
You know what specific role, let me back up. SNET is, as the ILEC under DPUC and Pura rulings, is the custodian of the communications gain, or some people use the term steward of the communications gain on the pole. In that role, what does SNET, what are their responsibilities about the make-ready process for a new attacher?
I'm not an expert on the make-ready process. As I understand it, providers can ask Frontier to do some preparatory work or some preparatory design work. My understanding, though, is providers can also exercise self-help under certain circumstances to do that work on their own.
That is true, but you are aware, I presume, that not one provider has exercised its self-help in terms of make-ready, or excuse me, engineering, and not one provider has, and Attorney Thomas is agreeing with me, I think, but not one company has taken advantage of, not one attacher, excuse me, has taken advantage of one-touch make-ready. So it's all on the EDC and the ILEC.
I understand that they may not be taking advantage of it, but they do have the right to do self-help in certain circumstances. My experience in other states is that providers would rather ask Frontier to do that on their behalf than to engage their own contractors to do that independently.
Okay. And again, since SNET is the custodian of the communications space on utility pole per Pura orders, can we get an exhibit that reflects what duties and responsibilities Frontier does undertake as the custodian of the communications space in Connecticut? And the reason is that we want that in the record for Verizon as well as for us as to what you're doing.
So can you, maybe just to clarify what you're trying to get, are you trying to get compilation of all the orders from all the various dockets over the last 20 years on?
No,
what the
not at all.
responsibilities
No,
are?
just the actual, what do they do? Do you set new poles? Do you set new anchor wires? Do you do any visual observations? Do you place or replace guys?
General categories of work that,
General categories of work that you deem, if Verizon were coming in to say to you, what do you do as what is this custodian of the pole? Let's assume they're not in Connecticut. What is this custodian of the pole? What are the responsibilities? We'd like you to write down what those are and put that in as a.
and are you saying that is that something somehow different than what Verizon is already doing in Greenwich?
I
in
don't
terms of
know.
its ILEC
I
responsibility?
haven't asked them yet.
Okay, just trying to avoid duplicating sort of efforts because
may-
Verizon already is in Connecticut and is subject to the same requirements.
They may have a different, approach to pole stewardship than SNET currently has,
So that, is that late filed exhibit 8?
It'd be late file exhibit A, and is it the general category of work Frontier undertakes as a custodian for poles?
Administrator, yeah.
That,
As custodian of the, as custodian of the
Administrator of the game, right?
administrator of the game, of the communications game.
Administrator. Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks.
I've seen all three,
Yeah,
you know.
I
Yeah.
understand.
I guess I can ask this question of both Verizon and Frontier, and I understand none of you work directly on the polls, but perhaps we can get exhibits on this. When you construct fiber on utility poles, do you install the fiber below or above your copper wire network? Or do you overlash the fiber on the poles?
I can speak for Frontier. Our general practice is overlashing on existing copper facilities.
And I'll speak for Verizon, and I would say that it depends.
Can we get a little bit more out of that?
If there's space that we could place, in some cases, we place fiber above or below the copper. In some cases, similar to Frontier, we would overlash.
And that would be your practice in,
Generally,
how about Verizon, New York and
that's generally what we do.
Connecticut? Excuse me. Right. We'd like to ask a way filed exhibit from Frontier on how many miles of fiber is overlashed to copper wire in Connecticut. And if there is any fiber that's installed above or above, below or above your respective copper wire networks, we'd like to know how many miles of that. I assume there's none based on what you've asked for. So we're looking for miles of overlashed fiber copper.
I would just say it's our what I said was it was our general practice to overlash. There may be circumstances where, as with Verizon, we are either above or below our existing infrastructure.
If we wind up getting into an estimated amount, that's fine too. We just want an idea of what the mileage is for overlashing and what the mileage is for.
Yeah, I think to the extent it's reasonably available, we'll definitely try to pull that information and get it as late filed exhibit 9.
That's fine. Overlash mileage. That one. I guess this is for both. In the areas where you retire your copper wire network totally, would you be willing to commit to remove that copper wire as one of the conditions for approval of this application? The reason we ask that is if you look at our polls for a state like Connecticut, some of our wires, it's crowded on that communications gain space. We may need more space. So would you be willing to commit to remove that copper wire?
I can speak on behalf of Verizon. At this time, we're not willing to commit to that.
Okay. Data in compliance filing shows the Connecticut still has some pole problems. Removing double poles on a timely basis, inordinate delays in transferring existing attachments, delays in make ready, and the quantity of the increased number of pole attachment applications. And now we have temporary attachments that seem to come more than temporary. Now, obviously, this is not all on Frontier, on SNET or all on Verizon, New York, but nobody's perfect. And so where you do have issues of being in excess of what the current time deadlines are that Pura has established over the last several years and various dockets. What commitments are you both willing to make to be at least 95% in compliance with all existing deadlines for make-ready, transferring all lines, both fiber and non-fiber, that are in all-in-one queue for transfer for both SNET and Verizon by the end of 2025? In other words, getting all the numbers down so you're out of compliance. I won't use the word non-compliance, but out of full compliance in terms of the time deadlines. What are you willing to do to get that caught up by the end of this year?
On behalf of Verizon, I would tell you that we're not willing to make that commitment that you asked for, but we will make reasonable effort to get the work complete. And we have a track record across Verizon for working that.
Frontier?
We understand the interest and importance in completing the transfers in a timely manner. We will continue to focus on that. Our progress is hampered by by the fact that, based on our survey, the records in Alden 1 are not entirely up to date. So that will always be an issue as long as other attachers are not timely inputting required information. We'll continue to address it, focus on it. But just to expectation set, we can't control what the other attachers do. And if their information is necessary for us to execute, that's a gap that is very difficult to overcome.
Right. Well, I'm trying to avoid getting into another situation like we were. I think it was docket 200431, not 0431, the 2020 docket, the non-compliance docket that you both were involved with, along with the EDCs. And I do understand that sometimes the attachers are not in compliance, but again, you are the ILEC and you do have that custodian role. So if you're not willing to make a commitment, will you be willing to provide a comprehensive full compliance plan prior to closing that will enable you to reach a 95% compliance with all existing deadlines for make-ready, transferring all lines that are in the Alden 1 queue for transfer? Would you be willing to do that? A plan, comprehensive plan that would get you in compliance by the first half of 2026.
I would just object to the extent that's already been asked and answered. I think you've sort of said, what are you going to do to make sure this is done by the end of 2025? You're sort of just asking the same question, maybe a different way. And I think they've answered.
And I further object to the premise of the question, just because Verizon may not acquire the entity until the end of 2025 or perhaps even later. So it's hard to put a plan at the beginning of 2026 for Mr. Sullivan.
Well, I guess my Attorney Fryer, my response to that is that both entities apparently are going to be around. Both entities have experience in terms of their own roles and responsibilities as being both a pole owner, a pole attacher, and the custodian of utility poles. These are our public streets and highways, and we have a right to know what their plan is because frankly, the reports speak for themselves, some of which are in the record, which show that they're not in compliance. All we're not asking, there's a big difference between the question of what are you going to do, will you commit to, and can you come up with a plan to present to the authority? That's all.
Attorney Fryer, I think, so there are two objections. One is asked and answered. We believe that the first question that was asked, whether there is a plan and what are you guys going to do to make sure this is done, That was already answered, and I think that answers the question. The second objection was, given, the uncertainty on the date of the closing, whether or not Verizon is even part of that discussion because it may not have access to the polls before then. So we still stand by both of those objections. I think Attorney Cohen only referenced and responded to the second part of that objection.
I think the question was asked, and the second question was just a variation of that, whether you're just asking for a confirmation of a plan, but you still asked what the plan was. So I tend to agree that it was asked and it was answered.
Thank you. We'll have to take a look at filing a petition to the authority to take a look and do an investigation as they did in 2020. We're not going to get a plan. Moving on, I believe. I don't think I have any more poll questions at this point. No. So you want to break now?
Break for lunch. Be back at 12:45. Sound good?
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. More work for you, Tim.
Yeah, no, I mean, just like the place. Slice, I guess. Time hearing.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Did you guys flip the mic? You turn off the mic.
Mike's.
Oh,
Don't be shy about saying that.
it is.
I understand. Understood. Question. I have.
I think it's just your mic that's low.
Attorney Seville. Attorney Seville. Yeah, who wants that? Set my password, please. Accidentally. Maybe that's the way we'll do it. You got the,
Or the RJ 45, how about your RJ 45? Yeah, what's the RJ 45? Okay, wait a second. Hold against the wall for a second. I just want to see the light if it went away. Yeah, it's dead. I saw that. If he goes over there, you should be able to see one if he puts that camera on.
We're trying to work on the video. The audio's on YouTube right now.
This one, then we're all at one. So I'm just gonna log out. All right.